Part 32. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 313. Mu Yangling nodded. That's the reason. Mu Yangling smiled, but you don't have to worry, even if people find out, it doesn't matter. This place is different from the Hu people's land boundary. As long as you don't occupy the land for farming and building houses, it doesn't count. Illegal. Actually, I'm not worried about the people on our side, but the barbarians on the other side of the kingdom of Jin. This place is close to their territory and there are not many soldiers stationed there. If they come to steal or raid grass valleys, we will be in danger. Zhongwu and Zhonglu opened their mouths, they didn't think about this question. The little general's racecourse is next door. Zhang Liyulai said confidently. That's why small thieves don't dare to come. If they want to come, they are big thieves. Zhongwu and Zhonglu looked at Mu Yangling eagerly. Now they are building a military camp in Xiaoshuling, but I don't know how many people will be stationed there. If there are too many people, the golden soldiers will have scruples, but you should be more vigilant at ordinary times. If something is wrong, don't worry about the cattle. Keep it yourself, life matters. Zhongwu and Zhonglu responded. Early the next morning, Zhonglu drove the mule cart home to pick up Ziyuheng. Mu Yangling and Zhongwu stayed in the cattle farm as supervisors, and the old woman who came to cook was washing rice and cooking porridge under Mu Yangling's command. The porridge is made by mixing corn kernels and rice together. The corn kernels are 70% cooked, and then the rice is added to continue to boil. After 2/4 of an hour, it is almost done. The thick mixed porridge, the old women in charge of the food not only swallowed their saliva. Mu Yangling frowned, scooped out the porridge, ground it, and squeezed a corn kernel into his mouth to chew. The old women felt a little apprehensive in their hearts. Miss, we cooked according to your measurement, not overcooked. The others nodded, thinking that Mu Yangling was concerned that the porridge was too thick and wasted food. But Mu Yangling said, the corn kernels are still not soft enough. Next time you cook them longer. Most of us here are old people and children. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and agreed. There were 20 pots of porridge in total, and the person in charge of the food would be responsible for serving the porridge for everyone, so the kitchen was half full. Maybe Mu Yangling was in the kitchen, so they didn't dare to let go of their stomachs to eat. The aroma of porridge wafted out, and all the old people and children who were escorted over surrounded them. Zhongwu picked up a gong and drum and rang, and shouted, "Queue up, all line up for me, take your own jobs, don't jump in line, and don't wait for me, don't make any noise." It was still dark at this time, only a little light in the east. Everyone rushed forward anxiously when they saw the 20 steaming pots, but when they saw Mu Yangling, who was a bit cold and solemn in front of him illuminated by the fire, everyone still consciously stand up. A child about 3 years old was squeezed out from the side and fell to the ground, looking up and looking around in a daze. His brother quickly pulled him up and wanted to put him in front of him, but he was pushed by the people behind him, and he was also squeezed out. Now the brothers wanted to cry. This scene all fell into the eyes of Mu Yangling. Her eyes turned cold, she looked coldly at the noisy people below and shouted, "Everyone line up for me, whoever pushes people out or makes noise, no one will do it today, don't eat breakfast." Mu Yangling's voice was so loud that everyone present could hear it. The crowd fell silent for a moment, and slowly, everyone stood back slightly. Mu Yangling said coldly, "Forget it this morning, but from noon onwards, give me all according to age. The youngest stands in the front, the elder stands in the middle, and the old man stands in the end." Mu Yangling glared at the old people angrily and said, "I know you are old fritters, but please remember, here, I have the final say, whoever is not convinced can turn around and leave. Here, 6 children under the age of 10 are the most important, and if I see you pushing the children out, I will throw you out." Although the old man who was yelled at looked ugly, he didn't dare to refute. Now it was the uncle who was eating, although the old people present felt that Mu Yangling was uneducated and didn't respect the old man at all. Mu Yangling was about to go crazy with anger. The reason why she was willing to accept these old people was that she felt pity for their age, secondly, they were energetic, and thirdly, they had so much energy after all. In other words, they left. We have traveled more roads than we have eaten salt, but what is going on with these old people? Yesterday he came to show her off, but today he came to bully the children? Mu Yangling stood on top of the place with a cold face, watching people scoop porridge for them, add some side dishes to a spoonful of porridge. Several children watched eagerly, and ran out as soon as they scooped the porridge. An old woman hurriedly shouted, "When the child comes back, I haven't asked for side dishes yet." The mixed vegetables for them were sauerkraut bought by Mu Yangling. Although the consumption of 3,000 people was large, but because the price was cheap, this consumption was not worth mentioning in front of so much food. Several children ran back together, took the side dishes and ran out again, and then ate together, looking around warily while eating, for fear that someone would snatch their things. Mu Yangling kept walking around the field, just in case someone snatched the food. But it is impossible for her to stay here every day to stop this kind of thing, so she still has to ask Chi Heiran to send a team of soldiers to maintain order and suppress it, so that she can feel at ease. After these 2 days, Mu Yangling also saw clearly that not every old man is as cute as his uncle and the others, especially those old people who have escaped and experienced life and death. And here are almost all children under the age of 12. That's right, she said she would be responsible for children under the age of 12, but Fan Zijian sent almost all of them under the age of 12, and there were only 378 of them over the age of 12. Mu Yangling took a closer look last night after going through the roster. Some children under the same age were caught in the middle before, and she saw that the youngest was only 2 years and 3 months old. Well, I can't even speak completely, but it's no problem to run around. Mu Yangling felt that he was not recruiting workers, but running a kindergarten. The most important thing was that Mu Yangling felt guilty when he thought of ordering these child laborers to work later. Looking at the child who just reached his thigh, Mu Yangling sighed, "Forget it, let's just play with the child." Mu Yangling knelt down, met those timid eyes, and asked, "Son, how old are you?" Mu Yangling really didn't know whether he was a boy or a girl. The child looked at her nervously, and grasped the porcelain bowl in his hand. Mu Yangling touched his head, and a 7 or 8-year-old child ran over, looked at Mu Yangling in a panic, protected the child behind him, and stammered, My brother 3 years old." Mu Yangling looked at the child and asked in a low voice, "Is it really 3 years old?" Mu Yangling's voice was a little low, maybe it was more majestic like this. The 7 or 8-year-old child's eyes were slightly red, and he lowered his head and said, 1 year and 8 months old, but the real age is 3 years old, my boss. He can also work and, really, he can hold a lot of hay. Mu Yangling sighed and asked, "Where are your parents?" The boy was taken aback for a moment, then lowered his head and said, "He's dead. He was beaten to death when he robbed people for food while fleeing." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 314. Mu Yangling felt sour in his heart, and his voice became softer, and he asked, "Who brought you here?" "I came with my uncle and aunt. My uncle is a strong man in the military camp, and my aunt has gone to a workshop. I have a cousin, and there is no food at home." Mu Yangling looked at the boy who was getting more and more embarrassed, and guessed roughly that it was considered good for his uncle and aunt to bring his cousin here. Mu Yangling looked at the little radish heads on the grass. How many orphans are there like him? Chi Heiran actually put them all into military households, probably to use them to occupy the share of the field, but what about these children? Without adults, they couldn't even support themselves. Mu Yangling frowned tightly. Mu Yangling could foresee that the money in her purse was disappearing rapidly. She touched the child's head and said, "Okay, follow your brother closely, and don't run around." The boy breathed a sigh of relief, hurriedly pulled his younger brother to kowtow to Mu Yangling, turned around and ran away. When the time came, everyone started to put away the bowls and chopsticks to pick up tools for work, because the bowls and chopsticks were all prepared by themselves, so the person in charge of the food didn't have to clean them up for them. Seeing Mu Yangling enter the kitchen, the people who were eating porridge stood up quickly. "Stand up." But Mu Yangling brought 2 big sacks of flour and said, "This is white flour and black flour, mixed with steamed buns, and 15 pots of porridge are cooked at noon. There is Chinese cabbage in the next room. Go and get it yourself, you all cook it, veteran cooks, 3,000 people should know how much to eat, so weigh yourself." After thinking about it for a few people, although there are 3,000 people, more than half of them are children under the age of 8. Children eat less, so they really don't need so many. Several people didn't want to lose this job, so they were busy thinking about it. Mu Yangling went out to work as a supervisor. He said that he was a supervisor, but he also helped with the work. He carried the pasture cut by the children to the cart, and then pulled it back. These pastures did not grow naturally, but the seeds sowed by the barbarians before. After the barbarians retreated, no one took care of this place, but when winter went to spring, the seeds of this pasture fell to the ground and grew again. No one grazed here last year, so most of the pasture seeds fell to the ground, and because of the wind, the pasture in this area grew very luxuriantly. The reason why Chi Heiran helped her choose this area as a cattle farm was not only because it was close to his horse farm, but also because the area spread out for 20 miles was no man's land, and it was all pasture, which was very convenient for them. Grazing. But no matter how much pasture there is, it will definitely not be enough with the efforts of so many cows and horses, so she will have to plant more pasture next year. I don't know if I can talk to the magistrate about renting the nearby land to her. While Mu Yangling was thinking wildly, Chi Heiran had already galloped up to her, and raised his voice to ask, "What are you thinking? Why don't you answer?" Mu Yangling straightened up, put the pasture on the cart, glanced at him, and asked indifferently, "Are you so idle?" Chi Heiran jumped off the horse, and said proudly, "Now the deputy can supervise the training well. You don't need to follow me all the time. It's not like you and Zijin, who do everything by themselves. You can't be too busy." Then Chi Heiran talked about the principle of knowing people and making good use of them. Mu Yangling said in distress, "Of course I also know that I need to know people and make good use of them. It is impossible for me to do everything myself, but how can I have anyone under my command? I told you to buy a few servants earlier, so that you don't have to worry about your family wherever you go." Mu Yangling shook his head, "My family is not used to slaves, and I don't want my younger brothers and sisters to develop that bad habit. It's better to do things on your own." Chi Heiran was not convinced. "Why is it a bad habit to use slaves? I have used them since I was a child, so I am not a good person anymore." Mu Yangling was stunned for a moment, and when he saw his angry look, he smiled and said, "That's not what it means, it's just that our family is a farmer's family, whose children are not thrown into the field when they are 4 or 5 years old. I don't force it, it's good enough to let them go to the ground, but we can't let them develop the habit of opening their mouths for food and stretching out their hands for clothes." Mu Yangling handed the scooter to a child, dragged Chi Heiran to a place where no one was around, and said, "I have something to discuss with you." Chi Heiran pretended to be all ears. "You got so many children back this time, what are you going to do?" Chi Heiran said distressedly, "I don't know. At the beginning, when I said that I could pay them travel expenses, I hoped that all the people except those young and strong would better leave, but who knew that they were so smart and weak, and all of them stayed. There are more than 700 orphans alone, but it is also beneficial. I put them all on their own and listed them as military households, and got a lot of military land, and when the time comes to rent them out, the money should be able to support themselves. Mu Yangling wanted to knock him on the head. Do you think the people in Hanshong Mansion are short of land to cultivate? Fang's Hifu allocated land to each household as soon as he came up, and military households have only one piece of land in the army. 100 acres, not to mention the allocated Yanjai land. Who do you think will rent those children's land? Chi Heiran opened his mouth wide, and stammered, then, what should we do then? You can't ask the master to keep them all the time, can you? Mu Yangling frowned and said, are their lands far apart? It's not far away. For the convenience of renting it out and managing it, I bought a piece of the orphan's land. Mu Yangling gritted his teeth and said, I rent it all. Are you crazy? Chi Heiran couldn't help but jumped up and shouted. Mu Yangling shook his head. I originally planned to build a nursery for all the orphans to live in. Mu Yangling looked at Chi Heiran. Don't tell me that when you asked your subordinates to build houses, put their share is also built. Chi Heiran touched his nose in embarrassment, and said, don't you want the people who rented their land to take the children back to raise them? Now time is tight, and the big guys can't build so many houses. Mu Yangling looked at him disapprovingly. Then you can't hand over the child to the tenants, who knows if they will treat the child well. I plan to build a nursery, put all the children in it, manage it in a unified way, and then hire a few gentlemen for them, recognize a few words, learn some crafts, and teach them farming and weaving. 14 years old come out later, then you will be responsible for their house. I will return the land. I thought it was a loss-making business. Since you plan to rent out their land, then rent this land to me as a reward. Chi Heiran felt that Mu Yangling was here to take advantage of him, but right now even if he wanted to rent land, no one would rent it. As she said, Hanshong Mansion has a vast land and few people, and no one is short of land. So he complied. Neither of them asked about those orphans. There was really no need to ask. The youngest was only over a year old, and the oldest was only in his early 12th year. You have to build me the house in the nursery school. I'll ask someone to draw a good picture later, and you ask someone to build it according to the blueprint. Mu Yangling couldn't help but lament that it's good to have a big helper at this time. Whatever you want to do, big hands just a wave. Do you know how much it costs to raise more than 700 children? Not to mention the annual food, it's just 2 seasons of clothes, the money for seeing a doctor and taking medicine, not to mention, you have to hire a husband for them. Mu Yangling looked at Chi Heiran seriously, and said, children are the future of a country. If we can't even protect our children, will our country have a future? Mu Yangling sighed at this point. I really admire Yuan Hui. How did he bring these people together? Could it be that all the orphans, old and weak in Tongchuan Mansion are concentrated here? Otherwise, why are there so many orphans, old and weak? Chi Heiran didn't dare to answer yes, because the truth is almost the same. Yuan Hui seems to be similar to everyone, but in fact he is more soft-hearted and tolerant towards the elderly and children, so he saw the old ones along the way, accepted them, and saw the young ones are accepted, and the old ones are taken with the young ones, but they are skipped when the young and strong are taken with the young ones or the old ones. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 315. The children on the cattle farm have been working hard, but some old people stared at Mu Yangling and Chi Heiran out of the corners of their eyes. Seeing that they were talking happily, they gradually became discouraged. The little general and this girl Mu have such a good relationship. If they cause trouble, I'm afraid I really have to peel off a layer of skin, so everyone is a lot more honest. Mu Yangling didn't know that she could still have this effect by pulling Chi Heiran to talk, and was discussing with Chi Heiran the address of the kindergarten and various supplies. Because the children are still young, there are both boys and girls. Even if the elder brothers and sisters can take care of the younger brothers and sisters, they still need adults to take care of them. Therefore, the nursery has to hire some people to cook for the children. As for laundry and cleaning, etc., because children over the age of 6 can do it, so Mu Yangling planned to let them do it by themselves. So much land, what do you use it for? Grow food, Mu Yangling said. 2/3 are used to grow food, and 1/3 are used to grow pasture. Both rabbit sheds and cattle farms need pasture. There are about 400 households here, more than 60 hectares. Where do you get so many people? Chi Heiran said. Please can't invite so many people. The current Hanshong mansion does not have so much idle labor. Mu Yangling smiled and motioned him to look at the cattle farm with his chin. Do you think those people can't even eat enough to eat, and they have money to rent my cattle? Chi Heiran stared at her with wide eyes. Exchange labor. Mu Yangling nodded. At that time, I will set a number, and I will help me plant as much land as I rent cattle for a few days. If it doesn't work, I will pay a lot of money to hire people. Anyway, the land can't be left unoccupied. Chi Heiran rolled his eyes and said, I'll help you. Mu Yangling patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, forget it, you should go back and train your soldiers, you don't know how to farm. Chi Heiran said that although he doesn't know how to farm, he can still do other things. After Mu Yangling thought about it, he handed over the nursery to him. Speaking of which, they are all from your 5th battalion. It's okay for you to take care of them. Chi Heiran was still thinking about who he had under his command, so Ziyuheng trotted over to look for Mu Yangling with a small box in her arms. Cousin, why are they all children? Ziyuheng asked pantingly. Although Zhonglu said that the cattle farm would expand and invite many people, she never thought that they were all children at a glance. She ran all the way down. At that time, I also met a child who could barely walk, and he was not as tall as the grass when he stood up. Did you bring the things? Mu Yangling looked at the box in her hand without answering the question. Ziyuheng nodded and said in a low voice, half of the family's money is here. After the family had a lot of money, it was naturally impossible for Mu Yangling to give tens of thousands of taels of silver ingots to the Tibetan family, so he divided most of the money into 2 banks, with half for Shu Wanyang and half for Ziyuheng. Mu Yangling motioned her to see those children, and said, Ziyuheng, you have to go to Hanshong mansion to buy some cloth and cotton, and make a set of winter clothes for these children. Ziyuheng was taken aback, and looked around the audience. There were children out of her sight. Cousin, these are not some. I know, so I have to make money. Didn't Butcher Chin send me a message 2 days ago? I have to call him back. We will continue to do that business. Ziyuheng frowned. Cousin, don't you think selling sheep is too tiring, and it takes too much time? But we are in a hurry to use the money now, and how can we not be tired of making money? Mu Yangling said that before because she felt that the money at home was enough, and she wanted to focus on the cattle farm, so she didn't agree down. Now that Hanshong mansion is no longer under martial law, the butchers of Qin can come here to sell sheep by themselves, but because they have more money now, one is to relax, the other is because Mu Yangling is more familiar with this area, and the third is because they are strangers to Hanshong mansion. If they want to do business here, they must pay respect to the Yamen. In this case, it is better to give the money to Mu Yangling and let Mu Yangling earn more money. A lot of effort. Mu Yangling just sighed at this time. Sure enough, no amount of money is enough. Chi Heiran listened on the sidelines, and in order to show his support for her, he planned to donate all his money to Mu Yangling to run a kindergarten. This time Mu Yangling didn't refuse and accepted it with a smile. Mu Yangling took care of the cattle farm for a day, and after making sure that no one was causing trouble, he handed it over to Zhongwu and Zhonglu. The child's cotton clothes were handed over to Ziyuheng, and she went to buy seeds for next year. Ordinary farmers keep their own seeds, and sometimes the imperial court distributes them, but these are usually in difficult counties, and there are not many of them, and the rest are bought at grain shops. Before buying seeds, Mu Yangling rode around the land of Marao. The land that Chi Heiran wanted to rent out was not bad, with a total of 65 hectares and 2 small streams, although it was dry now. But when it rains, it should be able to store some water, so it should be fine to grow rice near there. With the creek as the center, wheat can be planted outside, corn can be planted after that, and pasture can be planted at the end. Mu Yangling took a look at the humidity of the soil and thought it was okay, the overall condition was better than her own land. Mu Yangling was satisfied, and started to talk to the grain merchant about buying seeds. In fact, there is an advantage of self-reserved seeds. They have a great grasp of the habits of crops, but there are also great disadvantages. The more the seeds are kept, the lower the yield. It will still get worse in the future. Therefore, if the seeds you keep for yourself are more than 3 years old, you will go to the grain merchants to buy new seeds. Therefore, the seeds of grain merchants are generally the first generation, which is naturally expensive. Mu Yangling must be more cautious when buying so many seeds at a time, for fear that others will exchange bad ones for good ones, but when it comes to researching this, she is not as good as the old man, so Mu Yangling plans to go back to pick up his aunt. Buy some in both Xingzhou Prefecture and Hanzhong Prefecture, so that it is not eye-catching and can be compared more. In fact, Mu Yangling prefers to cultivate higher-yielding seeds by herself. She has no thoughts about wheat for the time being, but rice can be hybridized. Why do Hanzhong and Xingzhou prefectures grow less rice? Isn't it because there is less water, and rice is not drought-tolerant? However, it may take 10 years or even 20 years for hybrid rice to be produced, because within a year, hybrid rice with a certain characteristic must be continuously selected, eliminated, and rice without ears must be found. There is a long way to go, and even if it is found, it is not certain whether it can be hybridized. Mu Yangling didn't dare to aspire to the output of later generations, but it would be good to have half of it. Moreover, not only the seeds were improved, but also the farming techniques. Mu Yangling felt that the final yield of 500 caddies per mu would be very good. Up. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 316. Mu Yangling rubbed the seeds in his hands, looked at his aunt, who nodded slightly at her, and the shopkeeper smiled and said, "Ms. Mu, don't worry, the seeds here are all high quality. If nothing else, I promise it was the first year, and the wheat was selected to be the plumpest, and after it has been fully exposed to the sun, you can take it back and hang it on the beam, and it will be fine for 2 winters. If it's left for 2 winters, we don't need to buy it at this time," the aunt said dissatisfied. "Your kind of seed is not bad, but the price is too expensive." "Hey, old man, this price is not expensive anymore. You don't even look at the price of this year's grain. Since April, the price of grain has been getting higher and higher every day. It is not high for me to set this price," the shopkeeper complained. "If it wasn't for Ms. Mu's face, I wouldn't be able to pay this price back." The aunt sighed. "The price of grain this year is really high." She thought for a while and said to Mu Yangling, "Aling, let's plant wheat next year. I know you like rice, but this rice is not easy to grow. Look at this year, we harvested a total of 108 caddies of rice in the 10 mu of rice in our field, and only 1 caddy of millet was harvested from this mu, and it has not been ground into rice grains yet." The shopkeeper laughed and said, "Oh, that's a good harvest. My family planted more than 8 acres of rice, and we harvested a total of 3 caddies." Mu Yangling looked embarrassed and asked, "Did your family cut all the rice?" "Who has that skill?" the shopkeeper said. "Walk in the field with a sickle, and when you see ears and grains, You will cut them off. Cut them all. Who has that skill? Turn around and put the cattle in, just eat all the uneared rice. I took the rice back, but my wife said I wasted my time. You can't say that. 3 caddies of rice can fill your stomach for a day. Although we have food now, we can't waste it. Your old man and I want to go together. Look at those fleeing outside, they can kill people for 1 or 2 meters, let alone my 3 caddies of rice, and the 3 caddies of rice can't be said to be full. It was also bulging, but it was uncomfortable to see, when I sewed more than 3 caddies. Mu Yangling was still listening with great interest, but he couldn't help but startled when he heard this, and asked, "The shopkeeper, have you eaten the 3 caddies of millet?" "No, my family is used to eating noodles, and how can I eat 3 caddies of millet? I plan to grind them together next time I buy millet." Mu Yangling's eyes lit up. "Can you sell it to me?" The shopkeeper was stunned, and then said with a smile, "Ms. Mu, are you kidding me? What use are these 3 caddies of millet? If you want to buy it, I have a lot of people here, and I will give you a lower price." "No, I want it to grow out of the 3 caddies of dry land." The shopkeeper was suspicious, but he didn't ask on the spot. He just said, "I'll send someone back to get it." Then he casually asked, "Miss Mu, is there something wrong with my millet?" Mu Yangling just thought about it for a while and then confessed, "There is nothing wrong, but I suddenly remembered that these rice plants grew in such a dry land, and they might be able to adapt to the dry climate, so I wanted to try it out. If this method spreads, someone may be able to produce drought-tolerant rice faster." The shopkeeper shook his head and smiled when he heard this, feeling that Mu Yangling was taking it for granted. Originally he thought there was some secret in it. The ant sighed and didn't say anything. She knew that Mu Yangling had always wanted to improve the seed and planting techniques. She had been tossing a lot in the past 2 years. She thought that she had been tossing for so many years anyway, so let her continue to toss. Mu Yangling got 3 caddies of rice as he wished, and when he went back, he took out the 108 caddies of his own for comparison. The grains from the shopkeeper's house were fuller than hers, and it was probably because they were picked out when they were harvested. Up. Mu Yangling poured out the 108 caddies of millet, intending to sift it again and save the full grains as seeds. His aunt was dumbfounded and asked, "Are you really planning to use these as seeds?" Mu Yangling nodded, "Auntie, I still want to buy some more. Go to the village later and ask who has the millet left over from this year. Choose the ones that are full and buy them all. It must be this year." My aunt looked at the millet on the ground. The yellow-orange ones were indeed plump enough, and they came from her own field. She thought it would be good to use them as seeds in the past, so she didn't object, and nodded, "Okay, I'll now. Do you want to go to the grain store to buy some rice seeds?" Mu Yangling thought for a while, and said, "Buy some, and then plant them separately to see the effect. If there is no comparison, I don't know if this method will work." "Are you planning to grow so much rice?" My aunt still prefers to grow wheat. Rice is too low yielding, and corn is high yielding but too thick. "Auntie, didn't I say that? I just rented 65 hectares of land in Hanshong Mansion. How much rent do you need for so many lands?" "It doesn't need much, just keep those little bosses." "What?" Auntie didn't understand. Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Brother Heron brought a group of children back and put them into military households, but those children are still young, and although they have a large piece of land under their name, they can't be planted, so I gave it to them." Chi Heron said that he only needs to pay half of the annual tax, and the rest will be used to raise the children. The aunt immediately became uneasy. "Here, you have gone through the back door. How can you pay less tax? Turn around and tell the little general that we pay a lot as for the children, we also raise them. We rented other people's land. The rent is originally to give." Mu Yangling smiled and said, "Auntie, don't increase the tax, but you can give the children more things. If Chi Heiran doesn't rent the land to us, not only will they not be able to get a grain of grain, but they will have to subsidize the grain to those child. Then we can't undercut the little general, the aunt muttered, we are law-abiding people. Mu Yangling couldn't help but pursed her lips into a smile, and didn't dare to tell her aunt the cost of the kindergarten, otherwise she would feel distressed again. When Xu Wanyang came in, she heard her aunt was teaching Mu Yangling to be a good person, so she couldn't help but pursed her lips and said to Mu Yangling, "Ling, listen to your aunt." Mu Yangling thought for a while, then agreed, "Then I'll discuss it with Brother Heiran later." Only then did the aunt leave space for the mother and daughter, and Xu Wanyang nodded her daughters for it. "You, mother, I don't care what you do outside, but you have to remember, we won't take advantage of what shouldn't be, it's harmless, it's a blessing to suffer." Mu Yangling said helplessly, "Mom, I know, don't worry, I won't take advantage of those children just because they're not sensible, and I won't lose a cent for what's theirs." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 317. Mu Yangling didn't know why his mother was worried about this. Did he become a Philistine in their eyes? Xu Wanyang patted her daughter's head and said, "Mother is afraid that you will go the wrong way. There are not a few people in this world who change when they have money. You have made a lot of money this year." Mu Yangling sat up straight and said seriously, "Mother, although I don't know what step I can achieve in the future, I hope to help everyone. In this world, 90% of the people farm land, even if it is an acre of land. It is also good to have an extra caddy per mu." Xu Wanyang always knew that her daughter was working on an experimental field to increase food production, but she didn't know that she wanted to benefit the world, and thought she was doing it for her own production. Xu Wanyang was silent for a long time, then shook her head and said, "Ling, it's not mother who hit you. In terms of hunting, no one can compare to you, but in terms of farming, if you want to make achievements, you should ask someone to help you. Listen to your mother first." Xu Wanyang held her daughter's hand. "Mother knows that you have many ideas, but some ideas will not be fruitful if you put them into practice. After all, you don't know enough about land and crops. Instead of specializing in it, it is better to tell people who know how to farm your ideas and let them study, so that you can spare time to do what you are good at." Xu Wanyang smiled when she said this. "Besides, I didn't think you put more effort into the experimental field, so when you planted the seeds, you used different farming methods, but you know it even if you don't know how to farm. Just plant the seeds, and the 4 or 5 months between the leveling of the land and the harvesting are all knowledge." Mu Yangling blushed, hugged her mother's waist, and said coquettishly, "Mother, I know I made a mistake. I should leave the matter to others." Xu Wanyang touched her daughter's head and said, "I know that you haven't found the right person, and you don't want to spend the money, and you don't want to listen to your aunt's nagging, but if you want to accomplish something, you have to do it. There are many setbacks. If you don't go through it bit by bit, how can you get out? This year, my mother has been watching and always thinks that you are too impatient, but you have been yourself since you can talk and walk after the age of 6, you can be your own master, mother really doesn't want to restrain you." Mu Yangling raised his head and looked at his mother with shining eyes. "Mother, if your daughter does something wrong, just say it, don't hold it in your heart, I'm not afraid of being hit." Xu Wanyang smiled slightly. "Mother is not afraid of hitting you, but because she is afraid of being wrong, which will hurt you instead. The world is different from day to day, and the world may be in chaos at any time. At that time, the cruel people will be able to survive. Well, kind-hearted people may be buried in the mountains, Ling, although mother hopes that you will be a good person, she also hopes that you can live on." Xu Wanyang's eyes turned red as she spoke. This year, she couldn't dream peacefully. Her husband was away from home for more than half a year. Running back and forth between Hanshong Mansion and Xingzhou Mansion, even though she knew her daughter's strength was high, she still couldn't help feeling worried. Mu Yangling leaned in her mother's arms, and didn't know how to comfort her for a while. No matter what she did in the past 2 years, her mother supported her and would help her persuade her aunt. Only then did Mu Yangling know that her mother was not afraid of. Xu Huanyang patted her daughter's head, and said, "Okay, it's enough to be coquettish for now. Sharpening the knife is not a mistake for woodcutters. Your stall is too big, you must not be able to take care of it, you should hire more people. If you can't make up your mind, bring someone back, and my mother will check it out for you." "Mother, don't worry, tomorrow I will post a notice to recruit young men who are farming and have ideas." Xu Huanyang frowned. "Why do you want a young man?" "At least not an old man," Mu Yangling said with slumped shoulders. "Auntie and uncle don't approve of my tossing around like this. They think it's good to follow the rules in farming. Many old people think so, but I don't think it's right. People don't know how to farm at the beginning, don't they all figure it out step by step. It all requires an idea, so you have to find someone who has an idea and can farm, generally those who dare to let go of their hands and feet. Most of them are second 30 years old." Xu Huanyang burst into laughter, nodded her daughter's forehead and said, "You're still a young man in your 20s or 30s. He can be your uncle now." Mu Yangling blushed slightly, and said, "Didn't I just say that? You know, when compared to my aunt and the others, aren't 20 or 30 years old a young man? If you don't have enough money, mother still has some money here. Your father gave me a lot of money this year." "Mother, the money in the little box I gave you is still useless. How can I use the money my father gave me?" Mu Yangling leaned into Xu Huanyang's ear and whispered, "Mother, you can't panic if you have a heart at home. Our family is the same, we have money from time to time, so collect all the money that father gave you, and put it aside alone. Even if I lose all the money in the family, I can't take it out, it's for emergency use, understand?" Xu Huanyang responded, and said, "Your younger brother's master from the academy is sick, and he has started to repair the hall. When he recovers, it will be the winter solstice, and it will be winter break again. Take him with you when you leave, and let him go practice by your side." Xu Huanyang thought for a while and then said, "Bring Xiaolin along, this child is getting more and more shy. Even though she is talented in embroidery, she has to learn other skills, so that she can be more beautiful." She went to help Ziyuheng and temper her temper. Mu Yangling asked with a smile, "Do you want to take Bosi Kijia with you?" "Mother, there is a 1-year-old child laborer in my cattle farm. Bosi Kijia is 3 years old and can work." Xu Huanyang was dumbfounded. Why are you so black-hearted? You even recruit children over 1 year old." Xu Huanyang couldn't help but patted her daughter and said, "Even if you want to help them, you can find another way, why bother to torment the children? Waking up early in the morning is a crime." Mu Yangling smiled wryly and said, "Mom, I don't know. But those old people saw that I was young, and I was acting like an old fritters. When I carried the children into the house with my front feet, they could lie on the ground with their back feet and cry, saying I can't walk anymore when I'm old." Xu Huanyang frowned, she has never seen such a person at such a big age. "So I can only wrong those children for the time being. With so many people, it will be over after 10 days of work. No matter how many cows I raise, I can't use up so much hay. When the time comes, I will send them away. I will tell the children no matter what, they can't make trouble for me." Xu Huanyang hesitated for a moment and said, "Aling, this elder is still in front of Ao. Mother, I know that respecting the elderly is a virtue, even a basic morality, but isn't my daughter not capable enough now? There are more than 1,900 children under the age of 8 in the cattle farm, and there are more than 700 orphans. I know that the elderly should also help, but they have insight, life experience, greater strength than children, and various ways to survive, but children are different, some have never even been out of the village. The world doesn't even have the most basic understanding, and some don't even know their own surnames. Mu Yangling thought of the panic in the eyes of those children, and his heart became more sour. Mother, they are about the same age as Bo and Bosi, the world is too chaotic, even I can't guarantee that I can protect you 100%, I only hope that if they are in trouble one day, someone can help them and persist until I find them. Xu Huanyang sighed and said nothing more. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 318. Bowen moved his things back from the academy in the afternoon. He was a little depressed, and he was much happier seeing his sister, but his little brows still did not loosen. Seeing this, Mu Yangling couldn't help pinching his bun-like face. What are you worried about at such a young age? Sister, I've grown up. Bowen pulled his sister's hand and said with a frown, Mr. is sick. We went to see him in the morning. He was very sick. My wife has been crying. I don't know if it can be cured. After speaking, his eyes turned red. Mu Yangling was taken aback, and asked, why is it so serious? Didn't it mean it was just a cold? But Sir is bedridden now, and he has a high fever. I heard from my wife that he still has chills at night. Bowen's eyes were a little red. I fainted in class yesterday, otherwise we would not have known that Mr. was ill. What did the doctor say? Mu Yangling asked with concern. Because Bowen is not in good health, Mr. Lu has been taking good care of him, and Mu Yangling is naturally very concerned about this issue. The doctor can't tell, Bowen said disappointedly. Mr. can't afford good medicine. I have already given all my pocket money to my wife. Sister, let's hire another doctor for Mr. and prescribe a better medicine, son. How much pocket money do you have? Mu Yangling stared and said, it's not right. How do you know that Mr. Lu can't afford good medicine? His family should have a lot of money, so medicine is still affordable, right? The consumption in Mingshui County is not high, and Mr. Liu's family also has land. In addition to the shuxiu he received, the family should have a lot of savings. There are still a lot of people in the husband's family. The harvest has failed in the past 2 years. The husband has been using beams to cultivate the family. The teacher said that the husband has been ill for more than 10 days this time, and he has to teach us again. We have exam papers coming out, and there are many things at home, and if we get together, my husband's illness will get worse. Bowen said, Sister, I have read the prescriptions of my husband, and they are good, but some of them are not good enough. It can be better. I also asked the doctor. It was my wife who asked him to change the previous prescription. The money is not enough. Bowen has been ill for a long time and became a doctor, and he can tell the medicinal properties of some medicines at a glance, so he hurried back and took the pocket money he had saved to send Silver. Since Bowen went to school in the county, Mu Yangling gave him 100 yuan every month for emergency needs, such as buying school supplies, eating, or treating guests, plus red envelopes for the Chinese New Year, etc., and saved it for 2 years. Some money, although this amount of money is not much in Mu Yangling's opinion, but among Bowen's peers, it is a huge sum of money. But this huge sum of money disappeared without even a wave in the face of huge medical expenses. Mu Yangling didn't ask any more questions, and went directly into the room to get some money. Come on, let's go and have a look. Xu Huanyang heard the movement and asked in surprise, where are you going? Didn't you just come back? Hearing that Mr. Lu was ill, Xu Huanyang hurried into the room and took some eggs and put them in a basket for Mu Yangling. Take these, Mr. Lu has taken care of Bowen a lot. If you need help, just reach out if you can. Mu Yangling responded and took Bowen to Mr. Liu's house. Mr. Liu's house was very lively. More than half of the 23 students he brought came, accompanied by their parents. Some came with a basket of eggs like Mu Yangling, some brought a chicken, and some is it carrying half a bag of rice or just stuffing some money. In this era, a teacher is like a father. As a student, you should come to visit anyway, even if it is just to kowtow. Mu Yangling waited for everyone to leave, and then led Bowen in. Mrs. Liu's eyes were red and swollen, but when they saw Mu Yangling, they still smiled and stood up. Bowen is here? You are weak, so don't go in to see you, sir, lest he get mad at you. Mu Yangling patted Bowen on the shoulder and said, Master Lu, let my younger brother go in and kowtow to Mr. Lu. Shinyang Lu hesitated, because the children kowtowed at the door and left, but Mu Bowen was the most proud student of Xianggong, and it was okay that Xianggong also wanted to see him, so Shinyang Lu hesitated for a while and let Mu Bowen and Mu Yang Spirit went in. Mr. Lu was indeed very ill, his face was flushed, his brows were wrinkled, he was lying on the bed, covered with a thick quilt. Mu Yangling couldn't help but twitched when he saw it, and asked, which company did you invite for Mr. Doctor? It's Dr. Lu from Huishun Hall who invited me. It's my fault that I didn't pay attention. Before he took the medicine, he was almost healed. Who knows that he stayed up late a few days ago and suddenly became heavy again. Lu Shinyang has been on the same mind for the past 2 days. It was like being roasted on the fire, and it was very tormenting. If she hadn't neglected her husband, he certainly wouldn't have been so seriously ill. Ms. Lu, why don't you ask Mr. Dada of Rengzintang to take a look? Mu Yangling handed her 10 taels of silver, and said, the medicine used is better, and the fever may be able to subside, and maybe it can be cured after the winter solstice. I went back to the academy to give Bowen and them an exam. Shinyang Lu looked at the money in her hand in astonishment. Although there were some parents who gave money, most of them were 1 or 200 coins. With all my heart, the 1 or 2 8 coins brought by Bowen today is already a lot. Why did the Mu family send so much money? Rich. Shinyang Lu hurriedly pushed the money back, and said a little embarrassedly, the prescription prescribed by Dr. Lu is also good, and I was almost healed after taking his medicine. Shinyang Lu was a little ashamed at the end, and now she asked Dr. Lu to prescribe a cheaper prescription, because the family really didn't have enough money to afford a pair of medicines that cost 1 or 2 yuan. Nothing is as important as my husband's body. Mu Yangling held her hand and said with a smile, you guys use this money first, and I will bring Bowen to see him when my husband is well. Shinyang Lu opened her mouth, but still accepted the money. Seeing Mu Yangling got up, she hurriedly sent him to the gate, and immediately sent someone to invite Pang Kongqing to see a doctor after returning. After a night of tossing, Mr. Lu finally sweated, drank another bowl of porridge, and felt much better after wiping his body. Mr. Lu drank the medicine, handed the bowl to his wife, and asked, who prescribed this medicine? So strong. Mr. Lu was in a daze. Although he knew someone was in the room, he didn't know who it was, and he couldn't hear anyone talking. But yesterday afternoon, he started sweating after drinking a bowl of medicine, and his fever gradually subsided. No drowsiness anymore. Mr. Lu himself also knows some Qigong techniques, so he took the prescription over early in the morning. Although the formula is wonderful, but the dosage is strong enough, it can be seen that it was prescribed by a bold and careful person, and Dr. Lu, who they often invite, is used to being cautious. But he didn't have the guts to take such a drastic medicine. Speaking of this, Lu Shinyang's eyes turned red again. She wiped her tears and said, it's the great husband of Rengzintang. Fortunately Miss Mu asked me to invite him, otherwise you. He said that your evil wind has been in your body for a long time, and the root of the disease is deeply buried in your body. If you don't sweat, you are afraid that you will be burned to death. It's all my fault. In order to save that little money, Dr. Lu prescribed a cheap medicine. Prescription. Knowing his own situation, Mr. Lu patted his wife and asked, how much foreign debt did I borrow for taking medicine this time? I asked for some from my parents, and Mr. Chin gave me 3 taels. By the way, Bowen also gave me 1 or 8 taels, and the other students also gave me about 6 taels. Lu Shinyang glanced at her husband carefully, and said, Bowen and his sister came over yesterday and gave the family 10 taels of silver. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 319. Mr. Lu was just startled, and then said, write it down, and pay back when you have money. Shinyang Lu nodded, we have to thank Bowen and the Mu family. If it weren't for the 10 taels of silver, I don't know where to find money to buy medicine for you. The medicine that Peng Kongqing gave was strong, but it was also expensive, plus the money to supplement the body in the later period. 10 taels of silver was not too much, so it was said that this person could not be sick. Mr. Lu nodded and said regretfully, it's a pity that Bowen is a military member. Otherwise, with his studious and smartness, he will definitely be able to walk ahead of me in the future. Shinyang Lu smiled and said, I heard that Master Mu Jun is now 1,000 householder, and if he goes up 1 level, he will be out of the military. At that time, Bowen will be able to take the exam. Mr. Lu smiled wryly, where is it so easy? It is a threshold from 1,000 households to a general. But most of them can guess some, Qin who is obeying orders, but the generals have to train and lead troops to fight, unless Master Mu can be promoted to another level within 10 years, otherwise the blog post will be delayed. Actually, if it wasn't for Bowen's military status, he could try it out next year. Shinyang Lu didn't expect her husband to think so highly of Mu Bowen. The child will only be 9 years old next year, right? Mr. Lu nodded. Actually, the children's test is mainly about memorization, both of which are Bowen's strengths. The child memorizes things very quickly. He can read them 2 or 3 times according to the textbook, and then recite them twice with his eyes closed. He can memorize the whole thing by turning around. I have written down all these articles, and this is the first time I have seen such a smart person when I grow up. Shinyang Lu smiled and said, I thought he had a photographic memory. Mr. Lu said with a stern face, how can there be so many people in this world who can't forget? He is very good if he has this ability. The key is that he still has understanding. I always read it first by myself, and then refer to the sentence-by-sentence translation of Xu Wenji sentences. However, that child has his own opinions when reading the translation, and he doesn't fully agree with Zhu Zi's explanation, which shows his talent, but it's a pity, he is not a good student. Shinyang Lu often heard her husband lament this. She used to think that Mu Bowen was well-behaved, sensible, and studious, but now it seems that her husband has a feeling of sympathy for him. But it's also because he has good conditions. His sister bought him a lot of books, so that he can read the classics at will. The average student's family does not have this condition. Even the student with the best conditions in the academy family can't do what his sister did. 1 point, you can spend so much money to buy so many books back. You know, children who are generally enlightened are 1,000 characters, 3-character classic and the Analects of Confucius. If there is a condition, they will buy a single volume of Zhu Zi's commentary. If they are talented, they will continue to buy books. Sir, Lu Shinyang twitched a bit, but still asked, then are you going to end next year? Next year happens to be the triennial provincial examination. Faced with Lu Shinyang's expectant eyes, Mr. Lu reluctantly shook his head, held his wife's hand, and said, you can't let your mothers and I suffer for the imperial examination, right? Shinyang Lu immediately said, I'm not afraid, Mr. Gong, you'd better give it a try. Next year, the academy will be closed for a year. I'll go out to pick up some clothes for washing, and my parents, uncles, and younger sisters will be farming. It shouldn't be a problem, anyway. Xinyuan Mansion is only a few days away from us, so you can try it. Mr. Lu was silent for a long time, and finally shook his head. No, last year was drought, and this year's drought is even worse. No one knows what will happen next year. Only relying on those lands may not even be able to pay taxes. Xinianglu stopped talking immediately, because last year and this year, the output of the field was indeed not even able to pay taxes, and the husband took money to make up for it. There is none left. Mr. Lu closed his eyes and said, "Wait again, let's get through the past 2 years first, and I'll be more confident holding the book." Xinianglu didn't encourage him anymore, but her mood did drop a lot. But when Mu Yangling returned home, he asked his younger brother to write a recruitment letter, planning to recruit 3 young and middle-aged men who were good at farming and thoughtful to study farming. While writing the blog post, I asked, "Do I still need to study farming? Can you plant without research?" Bowen thought about it seriously. "I didn't know it before, but I know it now," Bowen said. "I thought that farming only needed experience, and it would be fine after planting it once." "You don't call it farming, you call it obedience." Mu Yangling found out Qi Min Yao Shu and showed him, "Those who really know how to farm will know how to compare and research, so they can pursue the optimal yield." Farming is also an art with the goal of minimizing labor force. Bowen opened his mouth wide. It was the first time he heard that farming could become an art. Mu Yangling touched his head and said, "Look, you don't understand, do you?" But Jia Sixi conveyed such a message that agriculture can be regarded as a separate subject. "Bowen, if it wasn't for my father and mother who wanted to call you an imperial examination, I really wouldn't. I don't think it's good for you to study stereotyped essays, it's better to choose what you're interested in and study." Bowen put down his pen and asked seriously, "Then sister, what do you like?" "I used to like weapons, so I learned the subject of mechanical manufacturing and automation, but now I think planting and animal husbandry are also good. At least for now, I am very interested in them, and I will improve the 2 technologies and develop 2 industry as a target." Bowen looked at his sister dumbfounded, because he was surprised that Mu Yangling regarded planting and animal husbandry so nobly that he didn't listen to the previous sentence in his heart. Looking at his sister whose eyes were bright with excitement, he felt that her sister would farming is farming, at least not like my aunt thought that farmers should plant food in the field, and farming is farming, but I think my sister regards it as a goal and an ideal. It turns out that farming and breeding can also become an ideal. What is your ideal? Bowen frowned, taking the imperial examination to become an official? But what is the purpose of being an official? Bowen suddenly panicked, as if he didn't know what he should do. Mu Yangling didn't notice the abnormality of his younger brother, but just smiled and touched his head and said, "So we have to invite a few people who are proficient in farming and have ideas to study with my sister. Maybe the rice in our Xinjiang prefecture will also be the yield per mu can be the same as that of Jiangnan, or even higher, and the yield per mu of wheat can also be higher." Bowen immediately picked up his pen. "Then sister, I will write it now, and tomorrow I will go to the county with you to post it." "How much should we pay them?" The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 320. As soon as Mu Yangling's recruitment notice was posted, there was not even a splash, because in this era, there are too few people who can farm but can read. She had no choice but to invite 2 people to stand by and read and explain to everyone. But the big guy didn't believe her recruitment, thinking that she was joking, a joke, and the matter of farming needs to be studied. Don't you know if you just drag a person in the field? So although there were a lot of onlookers, no one came forward to announce the list, let alone sign up. This incident has become a joke that has been passed around in 10 miles and 8 towns. Mu Yangling took the time to send Bowen and Ziyuheng to Han's Hong mansion, and asked them to follow Ziyuheng to arrange the children's winter clothes. When they came back, no one revealed the list. Just when Mu Yangling was wondering if he should try switching to Xinjiang prefecture, Lu Ting came to him. Lu Ting didn't go to the city very often, so he only found out what Aling had done last night after hearing the discussion in the village. The elders in the family thought that Aling was messing around, but Lu Ting was moved. In the past 2 years, Aling has always allocated a few acres of land for experiments. He knows it, because every time he farms the land, he will come to help. I thought, what Aling said might be right. Didn't people know how to plant before? It was all figured out step by step. During Jiaozong's time, although everyone had corn seeds, they buried them for nearly 100 years because they didn't know how to plant them. If they could try to plant them in various ways like Aling, after planting them then think about the reasons for good harvest or poor harvest, disease or health. Has corn been planted long ago? Now, everyone will not be hungry when they encounter natural disasters. The worst situation is much better than now, right? So Lu Ting and his cousin Lu Yuan talked and found him. Lu Yuan also wanted to come, but he was stuck by something, so he had to ask his cousin first. Xu Wanyang respected Lu Ting very much. After pouring him a cup of tea, she went to the kitchen to cook for him and let the two of them chat. Lu Ting looked around and asked, "Where's your aunt?" "My aunt can't be free, so she went to the backyard to take care of the vegetable patch." Lu Ting nodded. "Is the food at home enough to eat?" "Not enough, then ask your aunt to pick a load for you." Mu Yangling laughed and said, "My aunt not only planted vegetables in the yard behind the old house, but also the vegetable patch behind the old house, so there will be no shortage of vegetables at home, but there will be fewer varieties after winter. For a few days, I can only eat cabbage every day." "What else can you eat if you don't eat cabbage in winter?" Lu Ting said nonchalantly. "After a while, Uncle will repair the cellar for you. If you change some water frequently, the cabbage will dry slowly." Mu Yangling nodded. Seeing that Lu Ting couldn't get down to business, he asked, "Uncle, why are you here looking for me?" Lu Ting hesitated for a moment, and asked, "I heard that you posted a recruitment letter in the county seat to recruit people who can farm." Mu Yangling nodded. Lu Ting was silent for a while, and asked, "How can one be considered a farmer?" "Uncle is someone who knows how to farm." Mu Yangling knew that many people disagreed with his point of view, so he explained, "But I think planting is also skilled, from leveling the land to planting, and then to fertilizing in the middle, watering, harvesting. Different methods have different harvests. I want to find a better method for a crop. This belongs to the improvement of planting technology, and seeds. I think seeds can be cultivated." Mu Yang, seeing that Lu Ting listened seriously, he slowed down and said, "Now the rice seeds are not drought tolerant, nor high yielding, with short spikes and low plants of rice." Lu Ting frowned, puzzled flashed in his eyes, "But the seeds are all left over from the previous generation. How to cultivate them? You can't put the magic into the seeds like the practice, and the only way to get high yield is do your best to work carefully, fertilize the land, and be careful when fertilizing to ensure water." The more Lu Ting spoke, the more discouraged he became, and said, "This is not a fruit tree, it can still be grafted." Mu Yangling's eyes lit up. She couldn't explain the concepts of heredity and hybridization to him, but survival of the fittest could also be an explanation. Mu Yangling entered the room and took out a handful of rice seeds and put them on the table. "Look, Uncle, these are harvested from my field this year." Lu Ting peeled a grain of millet, chewed it in his mouth, nodded and said, "It's delicious, full and fragrant, and you can receive such good millet in such a dry day. It seems that you are very dedicated, but I remember that at that time, most of the rice in your field hadn't headed." Doubt flashed in Lu Ting's eyes. Did he remember wrongly? Mu Yangling smiled and said, "A total of 108 caddies of rice have been harvested from 10 acres. Lu Ting's face darkened. "This output? But these millets all grew in the dry fields. The nearby rice didn't even pick out the ears, or they didn't even form grains, but they just endured the drought." "Uncle, you said that its descendants can it also withstand drought?" Lu Ting was startled, and began to think seriously. "I think this kind of seed is just like human beings, not only the survival of the fittest, but also the inheritance of the superior gene. so I plan to do an experiment with these seeds in the spring of next year. What if these seeds are not drought tolerant? There will always be earing and fruiting, right? At that time, we will select the winners, but this only guarantees the drought. We must also ensure high yields, so uncle, I plan to go into the field next year and take a closer look to see if there are any ears that are particularly long. If there are too many grains, save them for seeds. But how do you turn two seeds into one? Lu Ting widened his eyes and said, they can't mate. Mu Yangling suddenly smiled brightly, and Lu Ting was dumbfounded. What is going on in your head? This rice can also mate, he said to himself. That's right, that ear is flowers need to be sown to be filled with grain, so how do you pay them? Seeing Aling staring at him with piercing eyes, Lu Ting stretched out his hand and slapped himself. See what he said in front of the child? I'm so ashamed to death, right? Mu Yangling didn't expect Lu Ting to think of this step, and said happily, Uncle, you can help me, you don't have to worry about the things in the field. When the time comes, I will invite people to work in the field, and the rest of us will concentrate on it, make those few acres of experimental fields. Lu Ting shook his head. It won't take long even if we go around there a day. Aling, your cousin has more ideas than me, so it's fine for me and him to help you. Let's remove the list. Isn't it a waste of money? No, you alone are not enough. We should recruit a few more people and brainstorm, maybe we can come up with more ideas. The main reason is that she doesn't know much about some things. Although she has read 2 agricultural books this year, she still doesn't understand many things, so she has to learn and explore from scratch step by step. But if the person is not from our place, it is not convenient to come to your place to work. There will always be a way. The old house next door is still vacant. At worst, people can live there. Don't Zhongwu and Zhonglu live there? They moved to Hanshong Mansion. I asked them to visit the cattle farm. Even if they come back, they can live in it. The old house is not small. Our family used to live there too. Lu Ting still wanted to object, but there was a knock on the door outside, and someone shouted, is anyone home? Lu Ting could only stop and wait for Mu Yangling to go out and open the door. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 321. The two men stood awkwardly in front of Mu Yangling, their mouths opened, their faces turned red and they didn't say a word. Mu Yangling looked at the two of them. One was strong and the other was thin. He had a thick complexion and thick palms. Standing in front of Mu Yangling, he turned his back slightly. It seemed that he wanted to straighten his back when he saw the person next to him standing straight. But it was a bit futile, so cold sweat gradually broke out on his forehead. The thin man next to him looked calmer than him, with a straight face, but his eyes were also full of uneasiness. He put his hands in front of him and kept rubbing them back and forth. Standing in front of Mu Yangling, he didn't speak for a long time. Mu Yangling had a guess in his heart, and asked with a smile, the two uncles are here for recruitment. The two nodded repeatedly, looked at the person next to him thinly, and seeing that he didn't intend to speak, they said, girl, my name is Sujian. I heard that you want to recruit people who can farm, so I'll give it a try. After speaking, he pulled Chen Sanzu next to him, and Chen Sanzu nodded immediately, yes, me too, my name is Chen Sanzu. You two know each other. Su Jian explained that they met before the recruitment list, so they came together. Looking at the two people who were so nervous and stuttering, Mu Yangling could probably guess that the two of them should get together temporarily to strengthen their courage, because Su Jian had been standing before the announcement for 2 days, and Chen Sanzu was even longer, almost at the top of the list it was posted, and he was squatting at the bottom of the wall, but because his clothes were too shabby, Everyone thought he was a beggar, so they thought he was squatting there because of the notice. In fact, Chen Sanzu was indeed a beggar. To be more precise, he was a refugee who wandered all the way from Xiangyang Mansion. Su Jian is from Xingzhou Prefecture. What's even better is that he can read a few words. Although it's really only a few words, Mu Yangling is also very happy. Inviting the two of them to the main room, Lu Ting hurriedly got up when he saw Mu Yangling brought the two of them in. Seeing Lu Ting's clothes, the two thought it was the parents, and bowed respectfully. Lu Ting was a little depressed. Did someone really apply for the job? Xu Wanyang had already prepared lunch, and Mu Yangling went to the kitchen to bring it up, and asked her mother to eat with the twins and aunt in the backyard, and she talked to them about things. You also pay attention to their character. You and your father will not be at home often in the future, so you can't recruit people with bad character. Don't worry, mother, I will dig out all 8 generations of their ancestors, Mu Yangling promised. She couldn't find out what the 8th generation of Chen Sanzu's ancestors were, but he was a tenant farmer for 5 generations. He was also a tenant farmer, but he was pitiful. At that time, he failed to grab the leased land, and he could only become a refugee because he had no family. Fortunately, both his parents died. Although he had several brothers and sisters, he was the only one who survived hunger, cold, and disease. Because he had no money, he didn't marry a wife, so he didn't even have a wife and children. Although it is scary to leave your homeland, you cannot survive without leaving your homeland, so you packed your bags and headed west. Why did you go west? Because he didn't know the direction. He originally followed the big guy to the south, but as he walked, everyone dispersed. He felt that he had always been walking in one direction, but he didn't know when he was biased to Xingzhou Mansion. Yes, before meeting Su Jian, he had always firmly believed that he would be able to reach Linen Mansion, the capital of the Great Zhou, after a short walk. When he learned that not only did he not approach Linen Mansion, but instead got farther and farther away, he was not depressed. He felt that living where is not living. Moreover, Xingzhou Prefecture seems to be an easier place to live, because even farmers can be recruited. 5 generations of his ancestors have been farmers, and he is also a farmer. Yangling was either recruiting tenants or long-term workers, so he was very excited. But he didn't have the courage to sign up when his heart moved, so he could only squat in the corner and look at the notice and the people who kept reading in front of the notice. Mu Yangling felt that although he was a cowardly person, he had not done anything evil. An ordinary person who has not committed any evil deeds in 28 years has a very low probability of committing evil deeds in the years to come. Knowing their life experience and household registration status, it is natural to assess their business ability. Mu Yangling handed this matter over to Lu Ting, and Lu Ting chatted with him for a while. It was all about field work. This Chen Sanzu was very good at it. He started farming at the age of 5 and planted it for 23 years. Up. Although Chen Sanzu has a naive spirit, he is not stupid. He knows that he probably passed most of the time. When he talked with Lu Ting, he almost talked about everything. He said all his farming experience in one brain, and it was Lu Ting. I also have to admit that even he is not as good as Chen Sanzu in terms of crop handling. While Lu Ting and Chen Sanzu were talking, Su Jian on the side straightened his back and listened with his hands clasped. Mu Yangling saw that his face was tense, so he asked him with a smile, "Uncle Su, what are you doing?" He is from Mingshui County, and he came to the county to do business. Su Jian twitched the corner of his mouth, and said nervously, "No, I'm here to see if I can find a job. It's not the autumn harvest, and I have a winter to spare, so I came to the county to find a job." "What kind of work does Uncle Su usually look for?" "I can do all kinds of work. The waiter, the kitchen helper, the cloth bag carrier, don't look down on me, I can do everything." Mu Yangling nodded slightly. Your family also farms? Su Jian nodded. I, I also have a few acres of land, but it's not easy to plant these 2 years, so. The tenant land can't even pay the rent. Su Jian thinks it's better to be a long-term worker, although it is hard tired, at least he will not stop cooking, and he will not be in debt. You must know that there is not much food in the field this year. He paid all the food for land rent, and found that he still owed the money. He was already poor, but now he is even poorer. Who did you learn your calligraphy from? I learned it from my uncle in our family. He used to be a waiter in the county town, and later worked as a bookkeeper. He learned some characters secretly, and taught me some after he came back. After learning about the family's 8 generations of ancestors, Mu Yangling explained his own conditions, saying, at that time, you will not only be responsible for the experimental field, but also my family's land will be cultivated together, which is similar to the long-term workers you mentioned, but I will not deduct your wages, nor will you reduce your food and clothing. On the contrary, as long as there are results in the experimental field, I will give you a red envelope. Both Chen Sanzu and Su Jian smiled awkwardly. Believe it or not, they were happy if the words sounded good anyway. Lu Ting felt that the conditions were too good, and couldn't help tugging at Mu Yangling's sleeve. Mu Yangling gave him a comforting smile, and continued to the two of them, since you have no home now, you can move here. The old house next door is also my family's, and 2 of my people live there, but I live in Hanshong Mansion. If the 2 of you get along well, share a room, let's make do with it first, and I'll expand the house next year. Chen Sanzu and Su Jian hurriedly waved their hands and said, no need to expand, no need to expand, girl, we have good tempers, so we just live together. Some people live well. Chen Sanzu and Su Jian are not ignorant people. Most of the long-term workers from other families live in woodsheds or cows' heads. The reborn wife is farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 322. Chen Sanzu has no luggage, so he can move in directly, but Su Jian said that he wants to go home to clean up. The most important thing is to tell the landlord that he will return the land he rented next year, and said that he just went out to find work. It's not that he ran away, but the debt can only be repaid slowly in the future. As soon as the man left, Lu Ting turned to Mu Yangling and asked, the conditions you gave are too generous. How can this be recruiting long-term workers? The guys in the county town don't have this kind of treatment. I'm paid well, but the work is also heavy, Mu Yangling said. Uncle, I'll let them search the land tomorrow, and you and Uncle Yuan Biao will come over to help, and then you and Uncle Yuan Biao will take the lead. They have nothing but food and housing, and you should check their treatment. Lu Ting only thought that Mu Yangling was joking, shook his head and laughed and said, you kid, you don't know who your mouth looks like, it's like you've been smeared with honey. That's all right, I'll come with your cousin tomorrow. So the next day, Chen Sanzu and Su Jian met Lu Ting and Lu Yuan at the door. Mu Yangling introduced the identities of the 2 parties, took out 2 contracts, and said to the 2, this is a contract. You have to work 10 times in my house after 10 years or 10 years, it is up to you to decide whether to leave or stay. Su Jian hesitated for a moment, and asked, Miss, then, can we marry a wife after saving money? Mu Yangling was taken aback, and asked, isn't this your own business? Lu Yuan said with a smile, Ling, the master's family will not if the long-term worker can get married. The master's management is too broad, right? Lu Ting explained in a low voice, generally, in order to reduce the number of people to support, the main family does not allow long-term workers to marry wives. Because the long-term worker's family has to work with the master's family, they are not afraid of having a daughter-in-law. Although an extra pair of bowls and chopsticks also requires an extra labor, it is different when they have children. Children under the age of 8 are not of much use. Mu Yangling suddenly realized, looked at Su Jian who was blushing and said, you make up your own mind, Marry if you want. After a pause, he said again, if you do well and the test field has results, I can help you give some dowry. Now not only Su Jian, but also Chen Sanzu's eyes lit up. Chen Sanzu didn't take this matter to heart at first, because he thought he might be a bachelor for the rest of his life, and marrying a wife required money, and he couldn't even support himself, so how could he marry a wife? But if the host is willing to help some, it will be different. Chen Sanzu and Su Jian slapped their chests loudly, and promised, Miss, don't worry, we will work hard. Mu Yangling was satisfied, and after signing the contract with them, he took people to the field, showed them the land of the Mu family, and then took them to see the plotted experimental field, saying, in the future, we will mainly focus on this area. Before the weather is cold and the ground is not frozen, let's turn over and bury the grass. Chen Sanzu and Su Jian said there was no problem, and they went to pull the plow one after the other. Mu Yangling looked at them for a while, and felt that the family still had to buy a full-grown cow. The mule and cart were now expropriated by Ziyuheng, and the family had to plant land. Livestock are also needed. Mu Yangling plans to plant all the rice seeds harvested this year next year. As for the wheat, she has no idea yet, so she can only hope that the four of them can have some ideas. Mu Yangling has already shared his thoughts with Lu Ting and Lu Yuan, but the effect will not be known until the rice is mature and harvested next year. So Mu Yangling just gave some pointers, and went into the city to buy 2 sets of clothes for Su Jian and Chen Sanzu, and moved them 2 bags of grain, and it was over. The vegetables are in the vegetable garden at the back, and you can eat them while I am away. Go to work in the field by yourself, ask my aunt if you don't understand anything. If my aunt asks you to do something, just listen. If you have something to do, go to my cousin Ting and the others, understand? Su Jian and Chen Sanzu responded respectfully, and only straightened up after Mu Yangling rode away on the horse. Chen Sanzu touched the brand new clothes on his body, and sighed, the clothes are too new, I have never worn them when I grow up. So what Miss said is true, Su Jian said with bright eyes and clenched hands, as long as we work hard and achieve results in the experimental field, Miss will definitely help us pay the dowry to marry a wife. Is that why you want to marry a wife? Chen Sanzu looked at Su Jian incomprehensibly. You don't want to, Su Jian said, I'm the only one in my family. If I don't marry a wife, my family will die. Chen Sanzu was silent for a moment, and said, my father didn't ask me to marry a wife, he just let me live. That's different. Now we have hope. This ideal should be higher anyway. Let's go change clothes and go to the field. Although the lady said that we should focus on the experimental field, we can't let go of the other fields, she said. Ms maybe sees our hard work, and she will marry us a wife in 4 or 5 years. Chen Sanzu was also full of energy when he heard that. He went back with Su Jian and changed his old clothes, took the newly bought ox, and went to the field with the iron plow on his shoulder. My aunt has been watching them in secret. Seeing that 4 or 5 days have passed, the two of them always go out early and return late to work in the fields, she is finally satisfied, and said to Xu Wanyang, don't look at Aling's young age, these eyes are poisonous. Quite right, the people selected are all capable and hard-working, not to mention Zhongwu Zhonglu, Chen Sanzu and Su Jian are full of energy even if no one is looking at them. Xu Wanyang pursed her lips and smiled, and said, Auntie, are you relieved now? Since Aling dared to leave her behind, she left, so it can be seen that she has made arrangements. Even if she said that the latrine is fragrant, you would keep nodding your head. The aunt mumbled, I really don't know whether you are the mother or she is. I have never seen such an obedient daughter. Xu Wanyang knew that her aunt was just talking about it, and now she was the owner of Ziyuheng every year, so she went into the house and took some money for her. Auntie, go to the city to cut 2 caddies of meat and come back, and give them some. Our family also eats something fresh. Bosi, who was playing with wood chips at the side, immediately stood up, looked at the two with bright eyes, and shouted out of breath, "Meat, meat, eat meat, I want to eat too." Kijia glanced at his younger brother with disdain, turned to his mother and said, "I want it braised in soy sauce." Xu Huanyang wanted to support her for it. "It's not short of your food, you have meat every day, but it's as if you haven't seen meat in 8 lifetimes. The aunt laughed loudly and said, "The children are all like their father, they all love meat." At this time, Chi Heiran also burst into laughter, and said bluntly in front of everyone, "A Ling is like her father, who loves to eat meat, so Mr. Fang, you just ask them to serve meat dishes, and the vegetarian dishes are reserved for you, let's eat." The smile on Fang's Hifu's face remained unchanged, and he kindly asked people to change the menu and change the meat dishes in the restaurant. Mu Yangling's hand quietly twisted the flesh on Chi Heiran's waist and turned around, but he said with a smile on his face, "Master Fang will spend a lot of money, I don't like meat or vegetables." The smile on Chi Heiran's face froze for a moment, and he was greatly relieved after Mu Yangling let him go. "It hurts too much."